Hello everybody. What we want to take a look at today is writing our own sub-procedures. Okay, it's a pretty simple thing to do. It's the tough thing about them really is figuring out when to apply them type of thing as we design our program. So up to this point in time, everything we've done has been kind of event driven. In other words, this whole procedure right here, this private sub-procedure, happens when the person clicks on a button called check guess. So I'm back to my little guessing game program. The user puts in a number from 1 to 50, clicks check guess, and we tell them whether or not they have a good guess or whether the guess was too high or too low, or give them some feedback there, right? So it's all event driven. Either the user clicks the button or they don't. Okay, now we can have our own little sub procedures here, and the point of having them is it's whenever we have areas of code that are kind of redundant, the same things happening over and over again, that's a perfect opportunity to put that into its own sub-procedure and then just call that sub-procedure when we need that particular thing to happen. So in our little guessing game thing here, what you'll notice is, so the user, there's a random number created, and we're using the old random number generation stuff up here. Random numbers generated from 1 to 50. The user puts in a guess in the text box, and if they've guessed less than what the low is, so let's say they guess 0, they're supposed to guess from 1 to 50, this message box pops up saying guess is out of range. Same thing if they guess higher than 50, or their guess is greater than the high, which is 50, message box pops up saying the guess is out of range. Now, it's kind of silly that we've got those two situations we're looking for, and we got the same line of code happening. So there's different ways we could do it, but this is a classic case where maybe having a little sub-procedure called invalid guess would help us here. So to create this, all I have to do is type sub and then the name of the sub. So what my sub-procedure here is going to be called is invalid guess. And when I type and enter there, all I did was type in the name of it, type enter, and you'll notice it put n sub in there for me, and it get these little two parentheses in there. We'll learn more about this later. Basically right now we just have a sub procedure that we could call and have do something. Basically down the road this gets even more powerful and more helpful when we can send information to a sub procedure, have it do something with that information, and send something back to us. So we would do that in the parentheses here. We'll learn more about that down the road. But for right now, what I want to happen is I would like this message box to show up if there's this invalid guess, right? So right now, instead of typing in messagebox.show here, right? Well, we're not going to do that anymore. What we're going to do, so I've created this little sub procedure down here that pops up a message box that says guess out of range. How do I get it to do anything? It's not a click event, so the user doesn't click anything. I have to tell it, hey, go run this sub procedure. So where I would want this to happen is right here. If the guess is lower than it should be, or the guess is higher than it should be, we're going to call, and what we called it invalid guess, right? So same thing here. Call. Could have copied and pasted if I was paying attention, but so if it's too low or it's too high, what we're going to do is call this sub procedure invalid guess, and this sub procedure, it's going to do its thing. So I know this is an example where I really saved tons of code or anything, but it's a simple example that just shows how we can do this. It's easier to just put in this call to this than to have messagebox.show typed in all over the place. Like I said, where this does get more powerful is when we send information to a sub procedure and maybe have it calculate something for us. You know, in that instance, because think about it. Let's say I want this message box to change in some way. I want to display something in it or something like that, a score or something like that. If I can just change it in one place, I don't have to worry about changing it in all the other places in the program where it might come into play. I just call that sub procedure and it changes it. Now, whenever we make our own sub procedure, we've been putting little comments off to the sides, and I haven't expected you to do that as much anymore because we should be getting familiar kind of with what we're doing. But whenever there's a sub procedure like this, you should have a comment above the sub procedure as to what it does. So I'm going to say it evaluates whether the user's guess is in the range. Okay? So whenever you do have a sub procedure like this, there should be a comment associated with it that shows what it does. So now in this program, if I put in something that is too high, that guess out of range thing should show up. Or why I would guess too low, I don't know, but if I did, guess out of range would show up there. So pretty simple. We can just make our own little sub procedure, call it what we've named it, and then wherever we want this to happen in the program, we call that sub procedure and it will happen. So like I said, in this example, we didn't save a whole lot of anything, but what it does is it creates reusable blocks of code. And like I said, this gets a lot more powerful when we start sending information to these sub procedures, and it's a good way to design programs, because here again, if I needed to change something in this message box, how it was set up before, I would have to go to a couple of different spots and change that. Now I just have one spot where this sub procedure is. So we're going to be applying this in some situations as we move forward.